These results are more than enough to get the Labour Party over the line at the next general election, which is supported by Professor Sir John Curtis, who's probably the best psephologist in the business. How do you respond, Mr. Holden? Morning.
Good morning, Nick. Nice to be on air with you, as ever. And
you use the word nice, then obviously I need to be a little bit more hostile in my my welcome to you. Is it time to retreat to the study with the brandy and the loaded revolver, Mr. Holden?
Certainly not. No. Look, but I do want to say just in opening that I've been out campaigning with a lot of our Conservative councillors and candidates up and down the country. A lot of them I know will be feeling pretty bruised this morning. These are a difficult set of election results coming off what in 2021 was a very high watermark for us when we gained seats in government after 11 years. But for those guys on the ground, I know many of whom have put their heart and souls into this. It's going to be a very tough couple of days. In reflection of the broader results, we've seen about a third of councils come forwards so far, a handful of the PCC elections and none of the big mayor elections. So I think there's still a long way to go. I think, as part of them, there's some mixed results. I think Keir Starmer put a lot of store by taking Harlow. He was visited there a couple of times during the campaign. A lot of shadow cabinet visits there. A very important seat, marginal seat for a general election situation. Obviously, they haven't taken
Mr. Holden,
Harlow
Mr.
Council.
Holden, you're not seriously
yes.
going to cling on to Harlow, because then I'll hit you with Rushmoor, Hartlepool, Thurrock, Peterborough Council, much of North East Lincolnshire. So let's be honest with each other. This is a night of disaster. What do the Conservatives have to do now?
Look, I think there are some mixed results in different places as well, Nick. And there are still a lot of results still to come. But you're right to say that it isn't a great result for us. I think one of the things that we've seen in the last few days come through is we really need to push forwards with dealing with the Rwanda policy and getting it delivering. We've got 9 to 11 weeks. We're hoping to see the first flights properly take off for those. That's what I want to see. That's a clear dividing line from Labour, who want that amnesty for people who've arrived here in the UK illegally, which I think personally will just encourage more illegal boat crossings. We've only just started to see those tax cuts come through, which we've delivered for working people over the last through national insurance. I hope over the next few months, with inflation continuing to fall, that will have more of an impact on people's pockets when they're actually thinking about what government they want after the next general election, at the same time as we've been protecting pensioners' incomes with the triple lock like we've been doing since 2010, after Labour left us with 75 pence increases in the pension.
What has the Prime Minister said to you this morning?
I've not managed to speak to Rishi so far this morning. I will be having a chat with him later today, no doubt, when we've got a few more results coming through. But we've come through a very difficult time over the last few years following the pandemic, obviously the war in Ukraine, now the war in the Middle East, which has really impacted internationally on things like on prices and inflation. He has been battling to get that down. We've still got further to go on that, but we've made significant progress. But there's still a lot more to do in the months up to the next general election.
There are, of course, as forever, rumblings about whether Mr. Sunak is the man to take the Conservatives into the next general election. Is he safe, Mr. Holden?
Yes, no, I very much so. I think the truth is that, as I said, coming off very, very high watermark results when we had that sort of vaccine bounce in 2021, what we're trying to do now is really cut down on taxes on work, end that double tax on work in a fiscally responsible way, at the same time as protecting people's pensions and putting that cash into public services while dealing with the international issues we face. All those are tough challenges, but I genuinely think, when we're facing those tough challenges, we've got the right man for the job. And
but why,
if
you've got the right man, Mr. Holden, clearly the messaging is wrong, because you've just sustained the third highest swing from Conservatives and Labour since the Second World War, and in council seats, for every 2 you fight, you lose 1. That's a 50% attrition rate. This is like Passchendaele or the Somme. You're not getting if the man's right, what's wrong with the messaging, Mr. Holden?
I wouldn't quite put it like that, and I'd also say, Nick,
you're sending councillors over the top, one of whom is not to return. How else do you characterise it?
Well, what I would say on that is that people aren't voting these local elections in a general election. They're not voting to change
I've worked that out.
the government of the country. But they are not good results for the Conservative Party. That is also very clear. But when it comes to a general election, and we're looking at council elections or even the by-election in Blackpool with turnouts of 30%ish or lower in many cases. And I think when people see the stark choice between a Conservative Party led with Rishi Sunak, which is dealing with illegal migration, with the Rwanda deterrent policy, which is cutting taxes and protecting pensioners.
Right. Okay.
And on the flip side of that, you've got an amnesty for illegal migrants under Keir Starmer and higher taxes and families paying more for net zero under Labour. And that's where we're going to be
on the idea of amnesty. Can I get a comment for you? There's a suggestion that Rishi Sunak will offer a deal to Ireland to deal with these people, so that would then become part of the deal with the pressures we're seeing between Westminster and Dublin. It's the front page of one newspaper, the Daily Telegraph. Do you have any more detail on that?
All I know about that, Nick, is that obviously it's up to the Irish government whether they want to take part. But I just want to be also very clear that we're not taking any form of returns from EU countries. Just like on the flip side, the French have never ever agreed to take anybody who's come illegally to the UK from France either. We will not be doing that. And but if the Irish government also want to have a deterrent effect, like we want to with the Rwanda policy, which means if people come here illegally, then they should be they can go somewhere else. Then I'm sure they should look at that, and we'd help them to establish a similar scheme themselves.
Last couple of minutes together. You're 20 plus points behind from Labour. You now look behind you, and just 3 points behind you is Reform. You won by party run by 117 votes. If you were coming into the Melling Road of the Grand National, you're likely to be overtaken in the turn, aren't you, by Reform?
Well, look, I think it's very clear, and I saw those results from. I was actually campaigning for the Conservatives back in 2014, where we saw UKIP actually sweeping up parliamentary constituencies right across the country. That's not the case with Reform. Reform have managed another third place finished in Blackpool.
117 vones.
Well, exactly, and UKIP were winning, seats, and Reform were briefing out tonight that they might come first earlier in the evening. Right. It's quite clear. It's really nothing has been crystallised from this result, from the results we've seen previously in places like Kingswood. All a vote for Reform does is help Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. It will a vote for Reform will help Keir Starmer into number 10 if it's repeated the general election. It could not be clear.